It's good to be together today. Hope you've had a really good holiday weekend. I know every year my kids always look forward to the annual dad rant about how fireworks. I might as well just light money on fire, and I don't want to do them, and then I go and buy them anyways for them. So hope you've had a really good weekend. I'm guessing that a lot of your stories are similar to mine. See, I want to follow Jesus, and I want what the world offers me as well. I want the things that Jesus can give me, and I want the things the world can give me. I sort of want the best of both worlds, and I think that I can kind of have it. In my mind, I go, I want Jesus to satisfy my soul and forgive my sins and bless me, but I also want this stuff over here, and I think that I can come up with this sort of perfect balance, right? I know that's not true because Jesus says it's not true. Jesus said you can't serve two masters. You're going to love one and hate the other, but I'm arrogant enough to think and foolish enough to think, I can come up with the perfect formula that's just enough Jesus and just enough of the world that I'm happy. And I really want him, I really want to follow him, and I really want him to put his head in the sand and look the other way so I can live whatever life that I want to live. And I'm sure that some of you feel the same way. You're like, I want to follow Jesus, and I want to have what the world offers me. This isn't a new thing. The story that I'm going to show you today is almost 3,000 years old, and God's people wanted it all. They wanted to follow God, they wanted a relationship with God, and they wanted what the world offers. And they just go, we want to have all of it. And so God sends this prophet, this guy named Elijah, to sort of confront them. And he comes with a question, and he says to them, how long will you waver between these two places, between these two opinions? If the Lord is God, then follow him. And he presents it as sort of a question that's supposed to it's supposed to wake us up a little bit. It's supposed to kind of shock their system, where he's like, I see you. You're sort of half in, half out on this God thing. If God is really God, then follow him. And this question so resonates with me and so challenges me because I want to follow Jesus sincerely. I want to follow Jesus, but I feel myself getting pulled in this other direction towards what the world has for me. I get distracted. I get tempted. There's pressure. There's expectations. There's just what the world offers. And so I find myself going in this direction, and I want to follow Jesus, and I want this, and I really want the best of all of it. I know you can resonate with that. I know you find yourself planted in two worlds where you go, sincerely, I want to follow Jesus, and I want what the world offers. Here's the good news about God. He's gentle and he's gracious, and he sees us, and he goes, I know where you are. I know that you're kind of flopping back and forth there in the middle. And he calls us. He goes, I see you. You've strayed. Come on. Come back to me. Come back out of the middle. I want to pull at that a little bit today. We're going to be in 1 Kings chapter 18. If you got a Bible with you, get it out, turn it on. If you want to follow along on your phone, great. Don't be afraid to use your table of contents. It's kind of hard to find. It's buried there in the Old Testament. 1 Kings chapter 18, and let's talk about this people who, in one sense, wanted to follow God, and in another sense, wanted to kind of do what they wanted to do. Here's some of the background. The nation of Israel, they haven't completely abandoned God. They're worshiping him, but they're also worshiping other gods. They've built this beautiful, wonderful temple to the God of the Bible, the God of Israel, and within just a few years of its completion, they're over here building other temples and other altars so that they can worship these other gods. Now, for us, this seems kind of strange because we don't live in a time and a culture with lots of different sort of deities. We're not walking down the street and going, oh, there's the altar to such and such, and the altar to such, and there's a temple for so-and-so. But we kind of get this, right? Because we worship things other than God. We have all our little things that we go after. We have these little gods, lowercase g gods. We have the God of money and success and influence and sex and comfort and substance. And we have all these little gods. You've seen it. You've felt it. So we kind of get this. For Israel, it was this God named Baal. They wanted to worship God, and they wanted to worship Baal. Baal, if you follow Israel's history, if you read any of the Old Testament, you know that Baal comes up an awful lot. Baal has always been a problem for the nation of Israel. In fact, 500 years before this, God rescues them from slavery in Egypt. He does this miracle. He parts the ocean, right? And they walk through on dry ground. It's like an hour later. They're off worshiping some other god, this god named Baal Peor. But over and over, Baal, Baal, Baal. It just depends on what region they're living in at the time. The name changes a little bit, but it's always Baal. Who's Baal? Baal is a Canaanite god. Baal is supposedly the god of rain and fire and lightning and fertility and life and death. That is who Baal supposedly is. Jesus gives us a little hint maybe about who Baal actually is, because in one reference in the Old Testament, Baal is referred to as Baal Zebub. Well, fast forward to when Jesus is on earth, and Jesus one day is talking about Satan, and Jesus refers to Satan as, do you remember? Beelzebub, right? So there's a Greek and Hebrew, there's a connection there. Jesus, I think, is revealing to us who's really behind Baal, that it's actually Satan behind this idea of this god Baal, but the Israelites don't know that. So they want to worship the God of Israel, and they want to worship this god Baal. You go, wait a minute, why would they worship a fake god? If Baal's not real, why would they worship it? And historically, why have people worshiped these fake gods or these altars or these statues or temples or whatever? Well, to be honest, the reason that people worship fake gods is because it works. At least it seems like it works. It seems like that God can give them what they want. Probably what happened is somewhere along the way, someone heard about Baal, and someone wanted to start a family. And that person prayed, and they go, oh, you know what? This time I'm going to try praying to Baal. And guess what? They got pregnant. And everybody goes, oh, that's it. Baal is the god of fertility. And so from now on, we got to pray to Baal for this. Or there is maybe a farmer who had a crop and he needs rain. And so he prays, and he prays to Baal. And then all of a sudden, it rains. And so everybody goes, oh, Baal is the god of rain. And so that's how these gods are sort of developed and why they worship these gods. And before you throw that out and go, oh, these ancient people are so stupid and superstitious, you telling me we don't do the same kind of thing? You telling me that every time something goes wrong, you run right to God? You don't run somewhere else, really? That we don't run to, you have a bad day, things kind of falling apart. We don't run to a few drinks? We don't run to, I don't know about you, when I'm stressed, I spend money, a little retail therapy. Right? Some of you overeat. So we run to things. We have these little gods that we've made up in our mind. And what we think those gods do is that they will fix things for us. They will give us what we want, because in the moment they do. Because those few drinks make you feel better. The world kind of fades away. You don't have to worry about stuff anymore. Spending money takes my eyes off my problem. Overeat, whatever, right? And so these little gods that we create make us feel something, and it feels like it's working. And so that's what the ancient Israelites are doing. They're worshiping God, and they're worshiping this Canaanite god, Baal. And so enter Elijah. God sends the prophet Elijah. And Elijah is going to talk to the king of Israel. He's going to talk to Ahab, and he's going to try and call God's people back. Hey, God sees you wavering back and forth. He sees you in the middle, half in, half out, and he's calling you home. Stop it with this pagan worship. Here's the interaction that Elijah begins with this king, Ahab. 1 Kings chapter 18. It goes like this. After a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. He said, go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. It's right in the middle of a drought. It hasn't rained in 3 years, and it's caused a pretty scary famine, and it's starting to have a lot of effects. It's a pretty desperate time in Israel. And so God sends Elijah to tell Ahab that he's going to send rain on the land. Why is this significant? Do you remember what I told you that Baal is supposedly the god of? Rain. Supposedly it's Baal who is in charge of the rain. In fact, for 3 years they've been praying to Baal, hoping that he would send rain, and it hasn't rained. And so now God goes, oh, yeah. By the way, I'm going to show you who the real God of rain is. I'm going to do my thing, and then you're going to know Baal's crap. I'm the real God, and I'm the one who can actually send rain. And God is going to challenge who Baal supposedly is on a number of fronts through Elijah. One is rain. Another one is that Baal is supposed to be the god of fire and lightning. Keep that in the back of your brain for where we go in this story. Baal is also supposed to be the god of life and death. But God, through Elijah, shows that he is the God over life and death. In fact, he enables Elijah to bring a young man who has died back to life. It's God's way of sort of going, let's be real clear who the true God is, and I'm going to show you who that God is. And that's part of what's going on here. You want rain, you've been praying to Baal, it hasn't been working. Let me show you who the real God actually is. And remember, all of this is to call his sons and his daughters back. You've strayed. You're doing this messy middle thing. Come back and be planted, be grounded in God. Look, jump ahead to verse 17. Elijah goes to see Ahab. It says, when Ahab saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" Elijah replied, "I have not made trouble for Israel, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and you have followed the Baals." He goes, I'm just telling the truth, man. I'm not the one who's caused problems. It's you who have caused problems for Israel. And why? He says it, because you've led the people astray. The state of Israel right now, it's in shambles, he says, and it is because, Ahab, of you and your father and the way that you have led these people. Verse 19, Elijah continues, he says, "So summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." Who is Jezebel? This is the queen, the wife of Ahab. She's nasty. Ahab is a bad dude, but he's merely the puppet. She's pulling the strings behind the scenes. And these two have pointed God's people towards worshiping fake gods. They have built monuments. They've built idols. They've built altars to these fake gods. It was their job to lead the people and point them towards God, but they've actually led them away from God. And so Elijah says, get everybody, get all your little prophets, and in fact, bring all the people of Israel, bring them to this mountain. We're going to have a little chat. Verse 20, "So Ahab sent word throughout all of Israel, and he assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people, and he said to them, 'How long will you waver?'" Here it is, right? "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him." The people said nothing. This is our question, right? Kind of the hinge point of this passage. How long is this going to go on? God says, I've seen what you're doing. How long is it going to last where you think that you can worship me and then you can just go do whatever you want? You think you can have me and you can have any other God or any other thing that you want. How long is this going to last? One Bible translation says, "How long will you sit on the fence?" If you believe that God is God, if you believe he says that he is who he's claimed to be and is who he's shown you to be, then follow him. But if you believe that Baal or somebody else is God, at least stop lying to yourself. At least stop playing both sides and then go and follow him. But how long are you going to waver? How long will you sit on the fence? Another translation says, how long will you dance back and forth between these two options? There's a Hebrew metaphor that might be at play here also. There's this ancient saying the Hebrews had of how long will you leap back and forth from branch to branch? Implication is you're climbing a tree and you find a steady, sturdy branch to stand on. Why would you jump out to a flimsy one? You found something solid to stand on. Why are you bouncing back and forth? And that's kind of what Elijah is getting at here. How long is this going to go on? Where you play both sides, where you want to be grounded and rooted in following God, but yet you want the world and you want to worship this other God. But he goes, before you answer, let me show you something. Verse 22. Then Elijah said to them, he said, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left." You ever felt like you were the only one chasing truth and righteousness? He says, "I'm the only one left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bowl and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. And all the people said, what you say is good. So don't try this at home, but they're going to have like this prophet showdown, right? And what they're going to do is they're going to make a sacrifice, and they're going to cut up a bowl, and they're going to put the meat on an altar. Each one is going to create it. The 450 are going to do it, and Elijah is going to do it. Keep in your mind that Elijah is outmatched, 450 to 1, and Baal is supposedly the god of fire, right? And what they're going to do is they're going to make these altars and these sacrifices, but they're not going to set them on fire. They're going to pray to their God, to Baal, and he's going to pray to the Lord, and whoever sends fire, now we know, right? Like, again, don't try this at home. God tells Elijah to do this. We're not to put God to the test. God wants Elijah to do this. And so, okay, here we go. We're going to have prophet showdown. It's coming. Look at verse 25. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given them, and they prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar that they had made. So they create this altar, they don't light it, they start praying, they start calling on Baal, and it goes on for hours, right? And they're dancing around, and they're doing these ritualistic things to try and get Baal to respond to them. Now here's a little nugget for you. That word, dance, right there, circle that word that they danced around. That word is the same word, if you go back to verse 21 where it says, how long will you waver? Danced and waver are the same Hebrew word. I don't think that's an accident. I also don't think it's a really great translation. It's a very rare Hebrew word, and it's hard to translate. But most Bible translations will have the word limp. How long will you limp back and forth? And we'll talk about the prophets of Baal limping around the altar. And I think that word is dropped in there for the Jewish people. In Hebrew, I think that word is dropped in there for a reason. And I think the author is trying to tell us that if you plan to get your meaning for life, your joy for life, if you plan to get fulfillment out of life anywhere else other than the one true God, you're going to limp through life. It's going to be a struggle. You're going to feel like you're dragging yourself along all the time. You will limp through life. And that's what the prophets are doing. The prophets of Baal are limping around the altar. Verse 27 says, at noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. I love this. I probably shouldn't, but just prophet smack talk, it's good. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or he's busy, or he's traveling. Maybe he's sleeping, and you got to wake him up. I think this is awesome. There's one translation that says, hey, maybe Baal is just in the bathroom. Go ahead and give him a minute, and he'll be with you shortly. That's fantastic. So, verse 28, they shouted louder. It's funny. But then it gets serious. And they slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. It's funny, but it's also sad. God's sons and daughters have so bought into the lie that someone else or something else is going to give them joy, that they're dancing around acting like idiots. They're frantically, it says, frantically praying and prophesying. And now they're cutting themselves, stabbing themselves, whipping themselves. They're standing in a pool of their own blood because they believe that that's what their God demands. This is how far they've strayed. It's sad. A couple generations later, there's a king who will sacrifice his two sons to fire because he believes that that's what Baal asks of him. It's terrible. But I think it makes the greater point that anything else or anyone else that we put our hope in or we look to for joy, anyone else that we trust, when we need them the most, they've demanded our life and we need them the most, they're not there. And you can point to this. You've seen this. You've seen people worship other things. You've seen people worship money, success, family, tradition, sex, substance, influence, you name it. And what happens? When they need it the most, that thing that was there that made them feel good for a while, it lets them down. In fact, it's not even there. It's a fake. The money's gone. The tradition is over. The influence is gone because somebody else is a better leader and more influential and comes along. The drug doesn't do what it once did. No more sex, no more fame. What? The tradition, the perfect little illusion of what a perfect family is ruined. And then what? See, we put our hope in these things other than God, and they demand our life. And they can't deliver. They're fake. And again, the question surfaces through this story. It just runs through it over and over again. How long? How long will God's people waver? And the prophets of Baal are finding out in real time. And it's funny, but it's embarrassing. It's sad. Because God's sons and daughters have so been led astray. And now they're finding out the thing they'd put their hope in wasn't real. Verse 30, Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. That's a big deal. He makes a way for the people to worship God again. He repairs this altar so they can worship and have a relationship with him. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." This is interesting. This would have been offensive to the Israelites that were there, because at the time, Israel was a divided nation. There was 10 tribes in the north that called themselves Israel, 2 tribes in the south that called themselves Judah. And the 10 in the north believed that they were it. They were the real deal. And the others were sort of the rogue, rebellious tribes. Not true. And so Elijah sort of puts his finger in their eye to go, no, you're on a bad path here. All of this is, you're in a bad place. Verse 32, with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. He dug a trench around it large enough to hold about 24 pounds of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, he makes this altar, right? He slices up the meat from this bull. He puts it on the wood. Then he says to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. And then do it again," he says, and they did it again. And then do it a 3rd time, he ordered. And they did it a 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. So you have the picture in your mind. He's built an altar. Everything is all laid out. Normally you want really dry wood so that everything will burn and the meat will smell really great and it's all be this wonderful, beautiful thing. He goes, no. I want you to just totally soak it with water. And then do it again. So much so that they're standing there ankle deep in pools of water that he's completely ruined this altar with. And again, he's stacking the odds against God completely. Remember, it's 450 against 1. Remember, Baal's supposed to be the one that controls fire and lightning. And now he's soaked the altar so much so that it's impossible for this thing to burn. He is setting it up so that foreseeably he cannot defeat the prophets of Baal. Verse 36, at the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and he prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and I have done all these things at your command." And I want you to notice, the difference between Baal's prophets and Elijah, where they were freaking out, and they're jumping around, and they're dancing around, and they're screaming, and they're doing these crazy, frantic things. And here's Elijah. You don't have to yell at God. You don't have to get loud for God to hear you. You don't have to get his attention because he's far off. Elijah is calm. He's in order. He's collected. He is at peace. And he just simply says, "God, I need you to show up today. God, I need you to make yourself known today. I know who you are. I trust you." And watch the next part. This is so important. This connects back to the how long will you waver question. Verse 37, he just prays, answer me, Lord. Lord, would you please answer me so these people will know that you, Lord, are God and that you are turning their hearts back. Please underline that, highlight that in your Bible. So these people will know that you, Lord, are God and that you are turning their hearts back again. See, this whole story is God calling his sons and his daughters back to him, turning their hearts. Come on, I see you. Come back. You get that, right? This isn't a message for pagans. This wasn't a message for people who are far from God. This is a message for God's sons and daughters. This isn't a message of salvation to those who are far off. This is a message to brothers and sisters, to the Israelites, to say, you are far away from God right now. Come back. He sees you. He loves you. He welcomes you back. This is a call to his children to come home. Enough is enough. He's pursuing his disobedient sons and daughters. Please, like a father, please come home. Verse 38, and the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. This was a no-doubter. He left nothing but dust. Even the stones burned up, which is weird because stones don't burn up. But God wanted to make a point, right? There's no doubt. He goes, I'm trying to show you something. And the question that bubbles from the back, so how long will you waver? He says, how long will you waver between the two options, between the two opinions? How long are you going to play around in the middle? He says to the Israelites, if you love God, then follow him. No more back and forth. No more planted here and planted here, grounded here. If you love God, he says, follow him. Man, this is my entire life. I want to follow Jesus. And I want the world. And God steps in here to his sons and his daughters through Elijah and goes, it doesn't work like that. If you're going to follow me, you're going to follow me and me alone. If you believe that I am God, you're going to worship me and worship me alone. You don't need to worship any other gods because you have me. Remember, I got to go back to it. Remember, he's talking to his children. If you're here today and you're not a follower of Jesus, you don't have a relationship with God, honestly, in some ways, this story isn't for you. Because it was for the Israelite people, and we can kind of bring it forward today to God's sons and daughters. But it's kind of not for you. Your story today is maybe, your invitation today is maybe a gentler one of Jesus just saying, just come and see, come and know about me, come and follow me. He says, come to me, all who are wearied and burdened, and I will give you rest, right? And so Jesus is saying to you today, come and follow, trust me. Let me forgive your sins. Let me walk with you. That invitation is there for you. But for the rest of us, God asks the question of the Israelites then, and I think of us today, how long will you waver? How long will you sit on the fence? How long will you try and live here in the middle? Remember, you can't serve two masters. Not my words, Jesus' words. You cannot serve two masters. And so if you think, I can balance it all, I can have Jesus and have the world, I'm sorry. Jesus goes, no, you can't. There is no messy middle. He's like, come on, I'm calling you this way. Now he's gracious and he's patient. He doesn't expect us to be perfect, but he goes, I'm calling you to be rooted, grounded in Jesus. And God in this story shows us who he is. Just in case there's any doubt on that hill, he goes, let me show you who I am. And of course, about 1,000 years later, on another hillside, Jesus showed us who he was, so that we would trust him, so that we would follow him. How long will you waver, brothers and sisters? How long will you sit on the fence between chasing Jesus and chasing the world? It's exhausting over here, isn't it, chasing the world? And so God says, come on, come back, come to me. Over here, if I'm God, then follow me. Stop wavering today. Let me pray for us. Father, I just would pray today what Elijah prayed for his people. Today that we would know that you are God and that you would turn our hearts towards you. Only you can do that. We can't. There's no words that I could say. This is on you, God. Only you can do this. Would you turn our hearts towards you, Jesus? So that we would, like the Israelites that day, we would, at least in our hearts and maybe with our mouths, confess He is Lord. He is God. God, would you help us to see the things that we're chasing that aren't from you? Would you help us to see today the ways that we've grounded ourselves in anything but Jesus? Father, thank you that you're gracious and patient with us. You're gentle with us. As we turn our back on you, we spit in your face. We say you're not enough. We go after everything else, and you go, it's okay, come on. Come back home like a father. You're ready for us. So God, help us today to end the wavering, to end the dance back and forth between Jesus and the world. Get off the fence and be rooted in it, Jesus, and in your love. And God, thank you that you leave no doubt of who you are and how good you are. Maybe today there's some of us who, I think of that church in Ephesus in the book of Revelation that says they've lost their first love. Maybe there's some of us that have lost our love for Jesus. Would you renew that in us today, God? Renew our passion and zeal for the Lord, who took on flesh to become like us and who took on death to show us that He's God. May we not waver anymore today. We love you, God. We pray all these things in the name of the risen Christ. Amen.